They join, people join, so they just join automatically. Okay. Okay, right. So when the panelists come on, so they share their screen. Oh yeah, I was hi Mandy. You can't hear them.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear us okay, Mandy?
Yes, I can hear you.
That's good. Can you hear us, Vincent? Yeah? We can't hear Vincent. Are you muted?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. That's good. How are you both doing?
So, very well. Thank you.
Touch of hay fever. I'm a little bit sniffly.
Oh dear, sorry. Mandy, you're using PowerPoint, right? You're using PowerPoint.
Yeah, can I see if it will work?
That's a great idea, yeah. You want to have a go. Have you promoted them both to the centre? Fantastic. Do you want to try that now, Mandy? Yeah, do you want to? I think she's, yeah, when you're ready, Mandy, have a go at sharing your screen.
Yeah, I'm doing that, but I can't get.
Okay.
Oh dear. Oh, can you see that?
Yes, we can see it. Yeah.
That's perfect, Mandy. Do you want to try going between the slides? Just to check if that works?
I'm trying to go from to the slideshow. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's full screen there. That's great.
Is that good?
That's slide 2, yeah.
What do you want me to do now? Do you want me to stop share?
Vincent, would you like to try your presence? Just check that's working.
Me? Yes. Let me try. Yeah. Yeah. Hang on. Where is it gonna be? It would be here, I suppose. Hang on. Can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, it's gonna work as well. Hang on. I need to start like that, like that, like that, like that, like that, like that. It's loading. Yes, can you see it?
Yes, that looks good. That looks good.
Okay, okay.
Germany, yeah.
Okay, great.
Fantastic. So what we'll do is I'm going to do just a very short introduction outlining the aims of the panel. And then if it's okay, Mandy, we'll take your talk first. Like 10 or 15 minutes, and then Vincent will take your talk, and then Jimot is going to deliver his talk in person here. Then we'll have a Q&A, if that's all right. And then in the second half of the panel, we're going to do some like practical activities using the list of all the migrated archive documents from Nigeria. And also we've got some examples of migrated archive sources. So if you want to stick around for that, it's up to you. I'm not quite sure how the practical activities will work. with the people who are in the room versus the people who are joining us online. But we're going to ask those who are joining us online to email us, and then we're going to email out the resources. So, you know, you're welcome to stay for that if you want.
Thank you, Tim.
Does that sound okay, Mandy?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, good stuff.
I'm just going to open the door to this room because it's very hot in here. But the danger is that the cat may come in and make a nuisance of herself.
I'm sure the cat would be very popular if the cat came. Okay, good. Let's just give it a few minutes.
Is Jimo here? Dr. Jimo?
Jimbo is, I was just having lunch with him a few minutes ago, so he's definitely nearby. But yeah, he'll be joining us soon.
Very good.
She's just downstairs. Okay, I'm a bit nervous to be honest about the like technology side of things, but let's just do the best we can.
I'm very nervous about it too.
Well, I'm touching wood here.
Tim,
Yeah.
can I ask the audience, if I've got 5 minutes before we start?
Yeah,
I've got a few minutes. Can I ask the audience why they're interested in the Migrated archives? Why they come to the panel?
Why, like, yeah, what's got you interested in this subject matter? What brought you to see this panel?
Well, okay. Sorry if I'm going to say, for the person to know the reason why I decided to choose this panel. Okay, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Edith Sokol by Patrick. I'm a historian and a researcher. I wish to know more about the archive. I'll come about the archive, and I believe this program will also give me the opportunity to know how to carry out the research in the archive. And so far, the role the colonialists played in the Nigeria archive, and also, like I'm just reading here now that some of the documents the colonialists took from the archive are yet to be released, and Nigerians researchers abroad who have access to all these documents. So I believe this panel will help me to know a lot better about staying.
Thank you.
To the panel.
Okay, and I'm here to talk about next and what happened in the past. So I really want to dive more into it. And cover the and why substance and development. In as much as according to what I read, that the national archive this was available made available to research that national archives is not 2012, 2013. But the British authorities have still not returned the documents, and I really need to know more about this documentation. Why they didn't want to do it. So that's my research.
Thank you, Precious. That's great. Anyone else? Like, what drew you to this panel? Why are you interested in these issues?
I was not interested in this panel because I want to know the sensitivity of this document when we remove from the ethics. And I want to say what the society believe that will affect the image of the government for them to take it from archive. And at the same time, we are doing this to the what are the things that scholars can get subsidized to how to remove historical facts from Nigeria. Thank you.
Good.
Thank
Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Yusuf Sikora again. So studying this final because this archive will also introduce us to new issues in historical studies as related to colonial Nigeria and Africa. So it's very important for us to know what are the issues already in literature and what other issues are there for us to look and look at ideas. So that's why I say. Thank you.
Thank you. Why are you interested in migrated archives?
Okay, my name is Mignolo Solana, based in like United University with Department of History and Diplomacy. For historians, archives represents a source, a source of knowledge. How do we know the past? And you know that archives, when it's only have the history, like the way of knowing what happened in the past, what I did, and because but you know that the past so that you can understand the continuity, what happened, what kind of thing go wrong. That is archives, knowledge.
Okay, great, thank you. It's gone towards two. Do you think we should start the program properly?
Yes.
Okay, well, first of all, welcome everyone.
Sorry. Please go ahead, everybody. Please go ahead, please put your phones on silence. Please ignore any form of distraction. One is about to begin. Thank you.
No problem at all. Thank you, Sam. Hello and welcome to this workshop about the British Colonial Migrated Archives. My name is Dr. Tim Livesey. I'm an assistant professor in history at Northumbria University in the UK. Before we start, I want to thank you all so much for coming. I'd like to thank our LSA colleagues who are making this Zoom possible. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm just going to give a short introduction now, if that's okay. So the British so-called migrated archives, that's migrated in inverted commas, are a collection of documents that British authorities covertly removed from colonized territories at around the time those colonized territories won their independence. So, for example, British colonial officials removed 413 files from Nigeria. For the last 10 years or so, most of these documents, but not all of them, have been available for researchers to use at the UK National Archives, but obviously that's in London. So this panel aims to do three things. First of all, the panel aims to offer an introduction to the background of the migrated archives. Second of all, the panel will allow us to work with some copies of migrated archives documents. So we're going to be working with some copies of documents. Third of all, the panel is going to introduce a mentorship scheme open to Nigeria-based early career scholars, which will make available digital images of the stolen documents and offer research support from an established researcher. So we'll talk about that more later. So in the first part of the panel, in the first half, we're going to hear three short talks about the migrated archives from Dr. Mandy Banton, who's joining us on Zoom, Dr. Vincent Hirabaran, who's available to us, joining us on Zoom as well, and also Dr. Jimoh Oluwashibun, who's here in person, okay? Then in the second half of our session, we'll have two practical activities that are designed to offer more insights into the migrated archives from Nigeria. Okay, once again, thanks so much for coming. Do we have any questions or comments so far? No? Good. Sorry, what's your...
So because for the station, I had a mail to
then your email is not active now, then I don't know how one can apply for this leadership testing.
We will talk about that over the course of the panel. Yeah, and I've got some information printed as well that you can take away. But we'll come to that a little bit later on, if that's okay, I think. So what we'll do is take the three, sorry, with another question.
My question is, I have some production dogs, so it's a good question. So I noticed that it's practically possible to have access to the post media recording in the special package. So like the future students or like students of our seven. So how do we navigate? How do we have access to post-colonial records?
Well, in this panel, we're going to focus on the colonial migrated archives. So that's something I'll be happy to discuss after the panel, but post-colonial archives are not going to be our focus in this panel this afternoon, okay? So like, let's over dinner or something later on, let's talk about that further, okay? Okay, great. So we'll take the three talks first, and then we'll pause for a Q&A afterwards. So our first speaker is Dr. Mandy Banton. She's a senior research fellow at the Institute of Commonwealth Studies in the UK. Mandy is a noted expert on the British colonial migrated archives, and her talk today is called An International Scandal or the Inevitable Consequence of Decolonisation, the Story of the Migrated Archives. Mandy, you've got 10 to 15 minutes. Thanks so much for joining us, and over to you.
Well, if I can make this work again. I did it before, why can't I do it now?
Sure, you'll be able to do it. Yeah, just take your time.
This is ridiculous.
We have your PowerPoint here on the computer if that's more convenient for you.
Yeah, the problem with that is that I've moved the script, the slides around, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is ridiculous.
Don't worry, Mandy. It's up to you. You can either spend a couple of minutes trying to share your screen, or we can hear you very clearly in the room. So, you know, I'm sure it would be fine for you to just give your presentation orally as well.
Yeah, I don't really want to do that without the.
Okay, we'll just spend a few minutes. It's no problem at all.
I think we're there. Can you see that? Can you see my slides?
No, not right now, sorry. There should be a share screen button at the bottom of your screen.
Yes, yeah, I did that. I got that up.
Okay.
But I'm now completely stuck. Oh, this is ridiculous. I'm sorry about this.
That's okay. Do you want us to take Vincent's talk first, Mandy? Would that help?
I'm not sure if it would, because I still have this problem
Later.
afterwards, won't I?
It's up to you. Happy to take Vincent's talk first, if that'll give you a few minutes just to have a look at your computer.
And you can't see that now.
Unfortunately, no, sorry. If you want, you could email it to us.
Let me see if I can do that. I'm really
Um,
sorry about this.
No problem. Sam, could you please put our email in the chat, Lagos Studies Association 3@gmail.com. Sam is gonna, my colleague Sam will put our email address in the chat. Thanks, Sam. Oops, I think it's a.
Sorry, could you say it to me? Because I can't see it.
It's Lagos
Yeah.
Studies Association 3, the number 3
Yeah.
@gmail.com. And it's in the chat now as well. Sorry for the delay, everyone. We'll be with you in a moment. The joys of Zoom.
Right, I've sent it.
Okay, Sam, would you mind just having a look in our Gmail? There we go.
Have you got it?
Yeah, we've got it. We're just opening it now, Mandy. The good news is that quite a few more people have just entered the room. So actually the pause meant that a lot more colleagues
few
will
more
not
have
be
come.
missing the start of your talk. So that's the convenient aspect of this. There we go. Can you see that, Mandy? Are you going to share our screen, Sam? Brilliant. We're just going to share our screen now.
Could you put it back to the first slide?
Yeah, just doing that. Is that the old version or the new version? What should your second slide have on it, Mandy? Is it the times thing?
Yes,
Yeah, okay, I think this is right.
I think it's right.
Good. Over to you then. Sorry for the delay, everyone.
Can you do it to slideshow?
Yes, is that okay, full screen? Brilliant.
So have you got it? Have you got it on slideshow now?
Yeah.
Because I can't see that.
It's all we can see now is your slides. We can't see you, but we can hear you very clearly. We can't have it on slideshow and
But
see
you've
you.
got.
Let's just not have it on slideshow.
I'd rather it was on. Okay, okay, if you think so.
I think we can't have it on full screen and you see it as well.
Okay, okay.
I'm a historian. I struggle with the Zoom. Can you see? Well, we can't see either now, can we?
So.
Right, there we are. Let's just, if you don't mind, Mandy, we'll just do it like that.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't mind.
Okay, good.
Okay, well, abject apologies to everyone for that total confusion. I don't know what happened there, but anyhow, good afternoon, everyone. In April 2011, the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office was forced to admit that for many decades it had been holding and hiding a vast collection of colonial government files removed from 37 British colonies at decolonisation. Second slide, please.
Second slide.
Yeah.
So forced, that is, as a consequence of a court case brought against the British government by veterans of the struggle for independence in Kenya, who claimed and won compensation for abuse and torture. The first of these so-called migrated archives had arrived from Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, which achieved independence in 1948, followed by Ghana and the Federation of Malaya in 1957, and Nigeria, of course, in 1960. There was uncertainty in London about what should be done with the official records of the colonial administrations. Should they be left for the independent governments? Should they be destroyed? Should they be sent to London? In 1947, in the Ceylon context, the colonial legal advisor suggested, next slide, please. The governor was partly a piece of the government of the colony and partly the representative there of His Majesty's government in the UK. It seems to follow normally from this that dispatches he received in the former capacity should remain with the independent Ceylon government. Those he received in the latter capacity can be treated as belonging to HMG in the UK and dealt with accordingly. His advice was not then followed, and uncertainty remained until 1961, when a standard policy was devised. Previously, the geographical departments within the Colonial Office were responsible for such matters, working closely with the librarian, who was responsible for the internal records of the Colonial Office. But responsibility was passed to the Intelligence and Security Department, which worked closely with MI5, the UK Counterintelligence and Security Agency, and had little interest in record keeping. The new policy was issued first to the East African dependencies in May 1961. It emphasised that certain papers must not be left for ministers and officials in the incoming independent governments. The next, sorry, that's gone on to another slide, slide 3. Thank you. Certain papers should not be left for ministers, and we've gone back to a different slide. Slide 3. No, sorry, slide 4. Thank you. Papers which might embarrass Her Majesty's government or other governments, might embarrass members of the police, military forces, public servants or others, for example, police informers, might compromise sources of intelligence information, might be used unethically by ministers in the successor government. There was no mention of the transfer of files to London or their destruction, although both possibilities were discussed in individual cases. The detail was left to the governors and their staff, so there was no consistency. Nigeria sent about 450 items to London, but Malta sent well over 4,000. There was nothing from Guyana, where everything seems to have been destroyed. From records held in London, we know little about the numbers destroyed. An exception is Malaysia. British officials there were reluctant either to burn documents or dump them at sea, the two methods suggested, for fear that local people would find out. Instead, they loaded them onto 5 army trucks and drove them 200 miles to Singapore for incineration at the naval base. Next slide, please. This is apparently the type of truck that the British Army was then using. Just imagine how many crates of paper files it might hold. A report of what was done in Malaysia was sent to Nigeria to aid decision-making. A British official there stated that he had no need for army trucks. Documents were being destroyed in small numbers on a daily basis. Even more important, I think, is that little is known, at least in the UK, about the practical implications for the newly independent countries of the loss of what were not then archives, but current records. Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, noted that the removal of documents seemed like a line drawn across our continuity. Next slide. He wrote, "It was as though there had been a definite intention to cut off all links between the past and present, which could help us in finding our bearings. It was a covert reminder that having ourselves rejected that past, it was for us to make our future alone." One implication for Kenya was that the independent government found itself responsible for dealing with a long-standing dispute over its border with Somalia without access to the documentary record. The migrated archives were finally released to the UK National Archives during 2012 and 2013 and opened to the public. There are extended closures, retentions and redactions, but it seems that nothing was then destroyed. In 2011, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office obtained a legal opinion that the migrated archives are UK public records, but refuses to release details. It contradicted a decision made in 1976 that they are not UK public records. The term migrated archives has been criticised. As one of the editors of the Journal of Imperial and Commonwealth History noted in 2011, it sounds as if the documents have themselves decided to spread their wings and fly to Europe. The term was coined in 1972 by the then head of the Indian National Archives. Can I have the next slide? He stated, "An important part of the archives of most developing countries presently lies in various repositories in developed countries. The former colonial powers have either taken them or else they were created in the colonial powers by the branch of government concerned with the administration of the colony. Morally, these records belong to the developing countries concerned. They are vitally necessary for reconstructing its history." In 1976, the International Law Commission, an agency of the United Nations, stressed the importance of migrated archives for the nations from which they have been removed. Next slide, please. Archives not only document the historical, cultural, and economic development of the country and provide a basis for a national identity, they are also a basic source of evidence needed to assert the rights of individual citizens. It's important to all nations and to mankind generally that the problem of providing access to archives and their restitution where required should be dealt with urgently. Discussions continued for years until in 1983, an international convention was agreed, the Vienna Convention on Succession of States in respect of state property, archives, and debts. Can I have the next slide? The convention is lengthy and its legal language sometimes difficult to interpret, but it stated that archives of the predecessor state during the period of dependence shall pass to the newly independent states. There are two problems here. First, the convention never came into effect, being ratified by too few member states. Second, in its wording that archives shall pass to the newly independent state, it appears to be looking to the future. But by 1983, British decolonisation was complete, apart from those places which remain UK overseas territories, such as Bermuda and the Falkland Islands. Very many colonial records had not been passed to the newly independent states. How could that possibly be rectified? Transfer of the migrated archives to the UK National Archives was overseen by Professor Tony Badger, who identified what he called a legacy of suspicion, which developed during the long years when they were hidden away and their very existence denied. Such suspicion has been exacerbated by the British refusal to return documents or to provide copies, as advocated by the Association of Commonwealth Archivists and Records Managers in 2017. Can you skip over to slide 11, please? Thank you. The association said, if repatriation continues to be unacceptable to the British government, ACARM encourages it to demonstrate transparency by making public the legal opinion of 2011 that is the basis of its decision to retain the records. ACARM also encourages the British government to demonstrate goodwill to the governments and peoples with which its history is intertwined by providing free digital copies of the records to the countries from which the records were removed. Next slide, please. The then Foreign Secretary responded to ACARM's requests as follows. He said, paper files are not routinely digitised and are publicly available for free at the National Archives, and visitors can make their own digital copies of files if they so wish. The Foreign and Commonwealth Office ignored the basic fact that most Commonwealth scholars lack the resources to travel to London. Africans, in particular, often find it impossible to obtain visas. Next slide, please. The UK National Archives has now taken the question of providing copies into its own hands. It announced earlier this year that digital copies will be provided for the relevant national archives, starting with Africa. Although this may seem a welcome and straightforward process, it will not address the needs of those countries who continue to demand return of the originals. It will also raise many practical, legal, and political problems that the countries concerned will need to address. I'm going to leave it there. Although the FCO migrated archives form only a tiny part of the displacement of archives worldwide, their story is extensive and there are unanswered questions dating back over 75 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mandy. That's great. We'll take questions, everyone, after all three papers. So please, if you have any questions, note them down. And after the three speakers, we'll have a round of questions. Our second speaker is Dr. Vincent Hirabaran, a reader in history at King's College London. He's a scholar of Nigerian history, and he has a particular interest in archives. And Vincent's talk today is called Hiding the Colonial Past, a comparison of European archival practices. So Vincent, when you're ready, over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for organizing this panel. I'm very glad to be here to talk about the Migrated Archives and to talk about their European equivalent. I also like to take this time to thank Professor Sahila Derinto, who's behind the LSA. It's an amazing conference, and I would like to thank him. I know he might not be here, but you know, it's a great opportunity to be here, basically. Today, I'm going to talk about the European situation in general, thinking about the main features of the main debates happening now. This paper is based on work I've done over the last, I guess, 7-8 years on the topic. I've published first part of it in 2017, and for Mandy or Tim, who might have listened to a part of it, I've updated the last section basically on what's going on up until now. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to talk about the situation in different countries, and I'm going to try to draw comparisons with the British situation. So let me share my screen. Can you see it? Yeah, all
Yes.
good. Okay, let's go. So first, what happened in Germany? If you have a look at the German situation, basically here you've got a few features which are quite interesting, meaning the situation is quite open. We can see a lot of colonial archives in Germany. Why? Because I guess the country had a very difficult past to deal with in the 20th century. You can see the legal dimension of the opening of the archives here with the Federal Freedom of Information Law from 2005, with the case of the genocide of the Herero in Namibia. But what's new, what's been happening in the last few years is that the government has focused on digitizing a lot of archives, and something that Mandy was mentioning about the migrated archives is happening here as well. You've got the government digitizing archives, so I'm talking about the Bundesarchiv, but we also got universities digitizing their own archives. You've got the University of Bremen here, but you've got quite a few of them as well. And for those interested in German colonial history in Africa or Southeast Asia, you can also have a look at the archives of the Colonial Gesellschaft. So the point is to say that in Germany, you've got a lot of digitization programs, and that's one side of the question. But the debate on archives doesn't seem to be as important as the one on art restitution. And that's also something I discussed with Mandy quite recently. The fact that people tend to talk a lot more now about art restitution. So talking about, in the Nigerian case, on the Benin plaques, how the German government and how the German museums will give back to Nigeria was stolen from Nigeria from the Kingdom of Benin in 1897. So basically, that's where the debate is in Germany today: digitization and art restitution. If you have a look at Italy, Italy had also quite a small presence in colonial Africa, as you would know. There's still, in general, I guess, a lack of interest from the state to have a look into this colonial past in Africa. You had a committee for research on the activities of Italy in Africa from the 50s to 84, which was a kind of semi-private undertaking. The state only started looking after the archives from 1984 on, basically. You got a rather limited interest to the public in the colonial archives, and I guess you can find more and more people interested in it, but you've got to think about historical novels to think about archives, think about the colonial past in Italy. And you've got one here from Francesca Merandri, which is called Sangue Giusto, which talks about the colonization of Ethiopia. So to go back to the point here, in a country like Italy, a little interest, but maybe you can find the fiction. You can talk about the colonization in the fiction. So not much about the archives, maybe here. If you think about Portugal with such a long colonial history, you've got more and more academic books published using the archives coming from the colonial empire. Obviously, people think about Mozambique or Angola or Guinea-Bissau, but they could and Cape Verde, but they could also think about the long history of slavery in Portugal. And that's something which is quite interesting for us, is that the debate is not exactly on archives in Portugal, but it's a bit like in Britain on the legacies of slavery. And that's interesting how the debate is on these aspects of things as well. There's another one which I'll mention when I talk about Belgium, is on Afro-descendants, people with mixed race ancestry who want to find their heritage. That's something which you can think about here. I was talking about Belgium, and that's exactly what's interesting here. Things have been very, very interesting in the Belgian case here. You had different commissions. The Belgians like creating commissions. One created in the early 2000s after the publication of a book by a journalist called Ludo de Vite, called The Assassination of Lumumba. You had a commission of inquiry, which led to the opening of the archives of the Royal Palace. And that was the first stage. And more now you've got a bit like in the German case, the digitization of archives, and something which is quite interesting here. Again, we talk about digitizing things. So we talk about digitizing royal archives, but also archives of the Tervuren Museum, now called the Africa Museum. You also have a new commission, which was created by politicians now 3 years ago, which came to an abrupt end in December 2022, when the Belgian parliament, fell short of apologizing to the state of Congo, to the Democratic Republic of Congo, and to the descendants of colonized people. So it's a relative failure here. But the consequence of this commission is quite interesting for us here, is that some of the archives are open to those who can prove that they were taken by force to Belgium by the colonizers in the 50s. So the descendants of these people taken by force, quite often mixed race people, have the right in Belgium to ask for the archives to be open for them. So that's quite interesting when you think about the opening of archives. It comes from ancestry, comes from the creation of heritage, and that's when you think about archives. That's the way that a lot of people go to the archives. That's why a lot of people go to the archives in Britain, for example. They're interested in their ancestry, and many people in the reading rooms in Britain are interested in their own ancestry or in genealogy, and that's exactly what's happening in Belgium, but mixed with a colonial interest. That's why it's quite fascinating here. That's called in French the résolution métisse, so métisse being for mixed race. That's quite interesting for the whole debate happening now. In France, and as you can tell, I've worked. You will tell in a second. I'm working on French archives at the moment. The debate has been quite interesting as well. Why actually? Because as in the British case, many archives were stolen, taken to France. People then use the word migrated. Some of them were digitized in 2014 and 15, and I was in the room when a hard drive of digitized files was given to the director of National Archives of Senegal. Why Senegal? Because Senegal was the capital of the French Federation of West Africa. So Senegal was that capital, and a hard drive was given to the director as a way to deal with the fact that some archives were not present on African soil, but on European soil. And that's quite interesting here. In the French case as well, we've got another interesting phenomenon, a bit like in the case of the migrated archives in Britain. It's the question of violence and especially torture, which was the center of the whole debate. Obviously, here we're not talking about Kenya, we're talking about Algeria, the question of the Algerian War of Independence, and the French tortured and killed a lot of Algerian soldiers. Something which is very interesting here for us to think about is the fact that the French also, like the Belgians did, created commissions to deal with that role. And in a quite interesting way, actually, in the French situation, the commissions are not composed of politicians. Historians are part of these commissions. And myself, I'm part of a commission of historians having a look at the war waged by the French in Cameroon in the late 50s, but also in the early 60s. Why am I talking about this commission? Because that's the only tool France has for the moment to declassify documents, to make documents available to researchers. So without the commissions, you can't access the documents. And to have a commission organized, you need to have a law or a legal decision taken by the French parliament, basically, to open the archives. So see the way it's going. There's a political decisions at the start, and historians have a look at the archives, and then all the researchers can access the archives. I'm carrying on. Spain actually could be quite interesting here for us because, as you know, there were a few Spanish colonies in Africa. And in this case, what's interesting for us is that when we think about the situation in Spain, is that people are much more interested in the Spanish Civil War or in the war against ETA in the Basque Country. But more and more historians have a look at different archives to uncover this colonial past, and they're interested in private archives. And the researchers such as Yolanda Aichela Cabre invites us to think about alternative archives, so that we don't fetishize government archives and we think about different ways of dealing with the situation here. And finally, I'll finish here because otherwise I can talk forever. Tim, stop me if I'm doing too long. But the Dutch case is quite interesting for us here because as in the British or French or German case, the state has chosen to digitize a lot of archives, and that's this digitization aspect which is very interesting for us. Why? Because actually you had the COVID effect, which meant that a lot of people had maybe time and funding to digitize archives, and maybe might need some time to think about it in a few years. But you have, for example, the archives of the Dutch East India Company, that's the VOC, you can see the title here, which are being used currently by historians of the Globalized Project to work on all of this, to work on the colonial past. So again, the solution is to think about digitization in this case. In the Dutch case as well, there's an interesting one as well. There's a case of archives being sent back. Many archives, not all of them, are digitized and then sent back to, in this case, Indonesia and Suriname. Okay, so that's I guess the most open situation in the whole of Europe. Now let me try to maybe summarize in my conclusion all the main points I try to draw from each country. Okay, so that we have we can talk about it later. Basically, what has changed in the last 5 to 10 years? In some countries, you definitely had what we could call maybe a Black Lives Matter effect. Many people were interested more and more in the colonial past, mainly dealing with slavery, the theft of art, and also archives. So in general, people went beyond the case of archives and maybe were more and more interested in what happened in Africa, what the Europeans did in Africa in the last 500 years. Somehow, as you can tell, the question of the archives doesn't seem to be at the forefront in many cases. But what happens is that people think about slavery, they think about art restitution, which might be more interesting maybe for the media, for the public in general. In each case, as you can tell, you could tell from my slides, we need to talk about national politics. In each country, you've got a national context, which is fundamental to understand what's happening. Obviously, there are larger trends. In each country, a lot of people think that in the archives, people will find the answers to past misdeeds or massacres. It's possible, definitely, to find such documents proving that there were atrocities committed by colonial troops or by the Europeans in general. But somehow as well, it's not always possible to find evidence of everything in the archives. Sometimes media and social media in particular emphasize a certain secrecy, which was not there. As in the case of the British Migrated Archives, large parts of the British administration were very much aware of the violence committed in Malaya, in Aden or Cyprus or Kenya. My point is that somehow we think that these archives, that all these hidden archives in Europe and in Britain contain secrets, whereas actually they might be much more open secrets than what we think today. Maybe the language about invisibilization of or silencing is too strong, maybe misses the point. I guess that's what I'm trying to say here. Somehow as well, that's my last point, I will finish here in this conclusion. As you can tell, many of these countries try to digitize a lot of documents. Obviously, it's impossible to digitize everything. That's if you talk to anyone, it's definitely impossible. We need years and years and years of funding and people working on these projects to digitize everything. It's impossible. But it's the fact, do we focus so much on the question of digitization because actually we don't want to discuss the questions of access, of giving back, of making things accessible? Maybe that's myself, I'm very interested in digitization, but maybe I'm forgetting that we need to talk to access to documents. We should think about the fact that the Migrated Archives were hidden for so long, and why were they hidden when there's no such a thing as a massive secret in them? So maybe we need to think about digitization, but we need to think about also access. I guess I'll finish here, Tim.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Vincent. That was great. So I think Vincent's talk really complemented the talk of Mandy by giving a kind of broader European overview, showing how different countries approach the removal of colonial archives in different ways. Our final speaker is Dr. Jimo Oluwasegun, who's a lecturer in history at the Federal University in Birmingham. He works on Nigerian history and has particular interests in the migrated archives. Jimo's talk today is called The Migrated Archives, the Right to Keep, Whose History, Whose Property. Jimo, where would you like to stand to give your talk?
I think I'll be possible there.
Yeah, you okay there? Good.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, see there, after the camera, yes. Thank you.
Hello, Jimo.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Good to see
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jimo. I came across Migrated Archive first was in 2013. Thereabout, where I was a doctoral student at Harvard College, University of London with him. He actually caught my attention to newly declassified documents lying fallow at Kew Gardens. But in 2016, I was part of Lagos State government delegation to Europe, looking for Lagos documents in creating Lagos State Archives and Record Bureau. So we were in the Kew Gardens and the issue of migrated archives, came up again. But in the last 5 years, the issue of migrated archives became prominent following the legal initiative by the remnants of Mahu uprising in Kenya, who actually filed a legal suit against the British government, claiming apology, demanding apology, and also pursuing some claims in forms of monetary compensation because they were tortured by the British forces. So the legal firm that was contracted by this Kenya actually started looking for documents to back up their claims, and the issue of migrated archives came into a larger picture. Initially, the documents, the British government denied the existence of these documents. And after so much scrutiny, the Minister for Foreign Affairs or Secretary for Foreign Affairs finally agreed that indeed these documents actually exist, and they were deliberately removed from the country. Now, the question is, migrated archives, do we call it migrated archives, removed archives, or displaced archive, or fugitive archives? Because the controversy also, we have to look at the classification, the title, whether it is migrated, whether it is fugitive, whether it is displaced, or whether it is stolen. If we agree that it is stolen, then who has the right to keep these documents? And it's not the right to keep, it's not about the archives alone. Also, artifacts looted from British territory. Really, these archives has to do with 37 colonies, but my main interest is on Nigeria. And when you look at the time frame of these archives, it actually covered the colonization period, basically from 1955, effectively when British started this withdrawal from retreat from the empire up to 1960. Now the question we have to ask is, why that 5 years? Why are they so particular about suppressing or silencing documents that has to do with the withdrawal or the retreat from the colonies? So these archives, basically, most of us have been working with the National Archives in Ibadan, Kaduna, or Enugu. And it called to question the complete history of Nigeria, especially before 1960. Now, it also offers opportunity for us to have a new historiographical study of Nigerian history
especially in the last 10 decades of British stay in Nigeria. Because what we had before now might probably be a fractured issue, because some documents have been moved. Now we are talking about migrated archives. Are we also going to be talking about archives and information that were destroyed? Because there was an operation in East Africa, which I am quite sure also existed in British West Africa, about Operation Legacy. Operation Legacy is about colonial officials burning documents, removing documents, even into private collections. So do we really have a complete picture of what transpired between 1955 and 1960 in this migrated archive? I mean, that is a big question that we as a historian history can make very well. And what are the consequences of these migrated archives? Basically, to me, why did the British remove this document? Perhaps to escape what I regard as escaping the scene of the crime. Apparently, some crimes were committed because part of the reasons that scholars have argued that one of the reasons is basically to save the Her Majesty government from embarrassment. What are you being embarrassed upon? What did you do? What are you trying to suppress? Because one thing about archives, it has to do with people's history. And of course, when you suppress history, when you damage documents, you are creating a false identity. When it comes to the post-colonial study, the colonial study of Nigerian people. Why you left archives? Because archives are not just a place where you can retrieve historical material. They are loaded sites that produce realities. But these realities have been doctored. Now, how do we write complete history of the colonization process in Nigeria? So, migrated archives, apart from this escaping the scene of the crime, we can begin to imagine and understand the violence of archiving process, because archives are not just ordinary materials. So the level of violence visited on archives in British West Africa or in British Empire, then we have to question the realities. If you visit Ibadan, for instance, certain files, you get the catalog of what they have at the repository. But when you get the file, certain pages are missing, even when the documents are available. You will realize that at times you come across documents from page 1 to 20, but from 21 to 25 are missing. Before now, I think the blame has always been on the archivists and the national archives. But I think we should begin to think about the broader implication of migrated archives. Perhaps they were removed by the colonial official because we are concentrating on what they have in London. But what have been destroyed? What about what they have as private individuals that are yet, because about 175 are still missing, 170 files labeled top secrets are yet to be found. Are they destroyed? Have they been bombed or migrated? If migrated to where? So basically, it is quite interesting to look at these archives and see how we can reinterpret or again question the earlier history of decolonization as written by scholars like Akim Tijani, Kunle Lawal, Ajayi, and Ekuku and Co. Because this new archives offer a new perspective on British economic interests in Nigeria, on the question of minorities. So it is quite interesting to look at these archives as part of a re-examination of British colonization, not just the decolonized period, but British colonization of West Africa. Other scholars have also argued that the kind of post-colonial realities we are facing today, that this part of the suppressed history might be responsible, because when you look at, for instance, the issue of Niger Delta, we have issue of minority, the Williams Commission. Do we really have a complete version of Williams Commission? Because when you suppress documents, when you destroy documents, then any document that comes from that institution is susceptible. So do we really have complete, version of Williams Commission and other minority studies in Nigeria and in British West Africa generally? So it's still a work in progress. We are looking at the documents, what the document really says. And again, I am surprised that the issue of migrated archives have not been taken up by the Historical Society of Nigeria. That is a surprise thing for me. Of course, we have members of the Historical Society of Nigeria here. Are we demanding for the return of these documents? Because there has been a legal issue of who has the right to keep these documents, whose history. If we agree that the migrated archives is about Nigerians and it's about Africa, are we demanding, because Mandy talked earlier about the National Archives making provisions for archives in the former colonies to copy. Yeah. Now, are you copying your own history if we agree that it's about history of colonized people? Is it our property or is it British property? If it is our property, then the question of who has the right to keep does not arise at all. Then if we agree that it's about Britain, it belongs to Britain, then whose history? You cannot write history of the people and you want to lend them the information about themselves. So the legal question of who has the right to keep is just like the Benin artifact and other artifacts that were looted in Nigeria. And we are begging for the return of these artifacts. Who owns the artifacts? The process of taking these artifacts or these archives out of the colony, it's not a legal process, because if it is legal in the first instance, it should not be hidden. Because if you look at the migrated archives was housed in one of the most secured places in England, next to the British Secret Service, MI16 or MI15, Anslow Park. You cannot remove people's identity. Then you claim ownership of that identity. Then you are claiming you want the Nigerian archives officials to copy. And that raises the question of whose property is it anyway? Thank you.
Thanks so much for that talk. I think you did a great job of pointing out the fact that the processes, the same processes of sorting files, which led to the creation of the so-called British Colonial Migrated archives, also saw the destruction of a lot of archives. And I think that's a really important thing to highlight. And yeah, the question of ownership, as Mandy mentioned, is crucial as well. So thanks a lot for your talk. Before we move on to the more practical part of the panel, I'd like to give you the opportunity to ask questions of our panelists. So we can collect some questions before giving our speakers the chance to respond. So does anyone have any questions for our three speakers before we move on, please? Yes, one question.
Yeah, I was thinking about the same there was an operation they carried out and destroyed actually migrated archive, right? Okay, so one taxi is also during the Nigeria from 1970 to 1970. There were devastations even in the University of Nigeria, National Archives. So is it also part of the operation?
Are there some questions, Sam, in the chat?
Yes.
Okay, should we have those questions? Would you mind reading them out?
I will allow them to speak.
Okay, that's good.
So we can hear you better than me.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Banton, you provided a picture of some Kenyans being tortured during the colonial era. And of course, we are familiar with the history of Dedan Kimathi and then the Mau Mau struggle in Kenya. Also, one of the subjects that came up during the presentations is this idea of hiding documents, destroying documents, in order not to embarrass the British Queen. This is my question. Does scholarship or even archives deliberately destroy documents and hide the truth in order to prevent the British royalty from being exposed of the atrocities and injustice that happened during the colonial era, considering what happened during the Mau Mau era in Kenya, and also some of the colonial violence that happened in Nigeria and Ghana? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, we have another person.
Okay, we've got one in the room and then we'll take the other online questions. That's okay, so please.
Okay, my question is that is it possible to have discrepancies between the records, the archives, and the narrative from witnesses or participants in that history that is documented?
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Tayo, can we? Hello, Tayo.
Hello. Yes. Hello. Hello.
We can hear you. Your question.
Right then. Okay. Yeah. My question is, I know that there's a lot of significance about this matter of migrated archives, but the support for the archives in Nigeria being digitized, is that part of this conversation? And I ask this in light of the fact that I have been around these archives because I'm an independent scholar. I have been to several Enugu, Kaduna, Ibadan, Abeokuta, even Lagos. And a lot of their materials are still paper-based. So is there a conversation within this larger conversation about supporting the archives to digitize their material? Because history is being lost with the state of in which our National Archives currently is in.
Okay, thank you. So we've got 4 questions there. One question about the destruction of archives during the Nigerian Civil War and how that might relate to the migrated archives issue. A question about whether archives were deliberately destroyed to protect the reputation of the British royal family and government. The issue of discrepancies between records and how this conversation relates, as I understand it, to the digitization of archives within Nigeria. So would the panelists like to respond to any or all of those questions? Would you like to go first, Jimo?
Okay. Operation Legacy in Nsukka, I think that is the post-colonial period. Yes. Well, the migrated archives is about the pre-colonial colonial period, 1955 or from 1947 or there about 1960. I can't really say authoritatively whether archives were removed or burned during this Nigerian Civil War, but of course it is possible. And Nigerian Civil War is not the conversation is still out there, the characters are there, the actors are still very much around. So we cannot really say that we have a true picture of information about the Nigerian Civil War. So then secondly, on the discrepancies in generating information, you see, the process of archival preservation is political. By the time you start sorting out information to preserve, already you are working towards a particular agenda. It is not just you take everything in the files and preserve for generation yet unborn, especially when it has to do with colonized people, because you are going to leave that information behind and questions will be asked. So the British deliberately, in preserving information, what to preserve, what to say about certain individuals are carefully selected and of course carefully analyzed. And that is why a lot of information might not be known to our generation or generation yet unborn. Certain information have been destroyed. And the remaining information that you have preserved, some are not going to be disclosed for the rest of our life. It is normal because in creating information, they are dealing with people's identity. And when you look at the Mau case that triggered these whole debates, it happened in 1955 or thereabouts, and the survivors of that massacre later challenged the British. The traces that legal challenge was based upon were inadvertently left by the British. It wasn't deliberate because this information was to destroy this information in order not to embarrass our Majesty government. So, secondly, it also has to do with post-colonial reality. Informations were removed to preserve a kind of neo-colonial arrangement because certain information might trigger mass, protests against the former colony if researchers were to lay their hands, on such information. So part of the process is to preserve this good relationship, remove whatever will embarrass the previous government, conceal the identity of colonial informants, and certain other sundry issues as well.
Thank you very much. Do we have any responses from our online panelists? Mandy, would you like to respond to the questions?
Yes, I mean, I think some of the issues that have been raised are just so wide, so complicated that it's very difficult to come up with answers that will satisfy any questioners. We put up on the screen the instructions that came out from the Colonial Office in 1961, telling officials in the various colonies what should not be left. And it's very clear from this that the main reasons were not to embarrass the British. And the word embarrass is very interesting. What on earth does it mean? I interpret it as meaning that the British were very, very anxious that people, particularly in the former colonies, should not know of some of their very worst behaviour. On the question of destruction, as I said, I gave that example of Malaysia and the 5 army trucks full of documents. But in most cases, from the records that is held in the UK National Archives, we know very little about the amount that has been destroyed. Kenya was the first country that agitated for the return of the records, and they'd been able to get a fairly clear picture of what had been taken to London simply by looking at what they already still had in Nairobi. But I don't know if that's true of other places. Sorry, so many questions have come up. I find I've been working on this question since 2011, and I find the more I learn, the more shocked I am by the way the British behaved. I mean, that's just my personal attitude to this whole sad saga. I'd like to say just one thing about digitisation. And the recent announcement by the UK National Archives that they are going to digitise the material. There are so many problems, I think, here. This is a very recent announcement, and I can't talk about the details, but quite clearly, what the UK National Archives will digitise is the collection which is available at Kew. And this is a collection which is very much doctored, if you like. A lot is closed, a lot is retained for very long periods, a lot is redacted. What the National Archives in Nigeria and the other places will get is that doctored selection. Whereas I think what people would want is if they are happy to get a copy, they will want a copy of the full collection as was removed from them in 1960 or earlier or later. I also think there are possible problems within those countries. I don't know about the Nigerian situation, but I have heard in Kenya, for example, that the Kenyan government may not necessarily want to make those digitized images available publicly. They might feel that they need to look at them themselves first and possibly conduct their own sensitivity review before releasing them. There are also practical problems. Somebody I know who's used the Kenyan National Archives recently says that they don't have any terminals in their reading rooms on which the digital images could be shown. And I asked someone at the National Archives here if any money would be attached to get together with the digital images. And of course, the answer to that is no. So sorry, but there are so many more questions that we could address.
Thanks a lot, Mandy. Vincent, any thoughts on those questions?
Maybe I could answer the section on Biafra, because I've worked a bit on the history of Biafra. I suppose, talking to Professor Chimakoroye, for example, could definitely provide a part of the answer here. I read recently a book by someone called Samuel Fury Childs, who talks about the archives available in what used to be the southeastern region. Many of them were definitely destroyed during the war, and some of them were still available in tribunals, for example. You could have a look at that, meaning that there are different ways of finding documents in places which could be unexpected. So my point is that actually maybe, obviously, in the southeast and former southeast, people won't find the archives in question those they want, but there might be some other public archives, some private ones, which might be interesting as well. And obviously the idea of interviewing people, oral history might be a solution here as well. So that's we can reconstruct the history of what happened in the southeast. Why am I saying that? Because I can link it to the Mau Mau case that Mandy we were some it before, and maybe that's what's interesting here. Yes, as well. So do you freeze? I mean, it's just me.
No, it's okay. Yeah, we lost you, but we heard most of what you said. We just lost you towards the end. Okay, thanks. Have you anything to add, Vincent?
I was just saying a bit like in the case of the Mau Mau, we didn't need to have the Migrated archives to know that there was violence and that people were tortured because of oral history and because of other documents being used. And I guess in the case of Biafra, it's the same. We know a lot of things already, and the archives may not be the only solution here. The written ones might not be the only solution. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks again to all of our three speakers. We're going to move on now to the practical aspect of the session. Okay, so if you're participating online, what we would ask you to do is email us in order to receive the session materials. So Sam, if you don't mind, could you put our email in the chat again? It's Lagos Studies Association 3@gmail.com. Just email us an email. It could be a blank email, and then we'll send you the materials that we're using so you can study those materials where you are. For those of us in the room, here's what we're going to be doing. I've got a list to begin with of all of the migrated files from Nigeria. On this list are the file numbers, the title of the files, and the dates. So there's not enough for one each, but yeah, if you could share those around the room, that would be great. Thanks, Sam. Also, I've got an overview of the task here. So we'll spread those around the room as well. Yeah, what I'm doing is this one, and we'll open this one. Okay. So have a look at this. It's not enough for one each, but share. If you go down to the top, I'm trying to share it. Okay. Great, so you should have the big document that looks like this, and the shorter document with the task. So let's just have a look at task 1. As it says there, there's the other one. Let's just have a look at the first task to begin with. So as it says here, number 1, there are 413 migrated files from Nigeria currently held by the UK National Archives. And there are 2 questions written there. What topics, issues, and historical periods do these files address? And B, for what kind of research projects would these migrated files form useful evidence? And for what kind of research projects would they form less useful evidence? So have about 10 minutes, work with the people sitting near you, have a look through these file titles and dates. Are these files that would be useful for your research? What kind of projects would these be helpful for? Over to you, have 10 minutes.
I want to be in the seminar room with Dr. Lizzie.
Sorry?
I want to be in the seminar room with you, Tim.
You have a soft copy, don't you?
We can email you the documents we're using, Vincent and Mandy, if you email us. Oh, brilliant. Could you email them to those people? You're an expert, so you. So yeah, that's the file. Yeah, definitely. If I'm playing because she's a new That's great. Thank you, If you want to just forward my email, it's up to you, yeah. I'm just saying, it's not possible, that. Okay, no problem. I don't have any more spares, I'm sorry, I've given them all out, so could you share with someone? Yeah, yeah. These are the, yeah, these are the ones with, that's good, well done, that's really helpful. So the introduction. So everyone, I would spend about 5 more minutes having a look through the life. Okay, have 1 more minute, everyone, and then we'll talk about it. So have 1 more minute. Okay, Jimo, I think we should talk about this now. Okay, everyone, can you finish off your conversations, please? Okay, so hopefully. Okay, can you finish off your conversations now, please, everyone? Thank you. Okay. What are your thoughts on this? Like, you've had a chance to look through the list. What kind of research areas do you think the migrated archives might be helpful for? You know, what kind of research projects would it be useful to see these files when you're doing that research? Let's have some thoughts. Yes, thank you.
I saw some issues on Nigerian relations. I think it could answer some questions.
Carry on, sorry.
I think answer some questions on the balance between solar issues. You know, that problem that I used some years back, where Bangladesh was handed over to Cameroon. And as I know the thing of Nigerians, people did not do their due diligence. I still feel Bangladesh should get Nigeria. So I think the government is referring to the anytime Cameroon, northern Cameroon, I think we should answer the question of the Bangladesh issue.
It's a really good point. So yeah, if you have a look at the list, there's a lot of material about the Cameroons and also the plebiscites that took place, about whether the British controlled parts of the Cameroon should be part of Nigeria and part of the Republic of Cameroon. So yeah, Cameroon is an important one. Thank you. There's another comment over here. Thanks.
So this is Nigeria, Nigeria break up. Like mosquito will break up.
Yeah.
I guess like assuming that is for good country. I don't think Nigeria our issue come. So I don't know what they're actually trying. Yes. So I believe that is something in there.
Yeah. It's a good point. One of these files is about potential British plans for the breakup of Nigeria. Jimo, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think basically let's look at this document and try to come up with area of potential research for scholars, non-scholars like yours, and how you can, what you can make out of this, topics like border issue, the issue of national unity. So let's look at the research potential as against what might have happened or what did not happen.
Yeah.
Okay, I think you have the photo.
I'm sorry, I can't hear what the lady's saying. So can we respect each other's contributions? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Research work on financial issues in Nigeria in the past, as in funds. So when I saw one of the documents dealing with a tribunal of inquiry into the handling of public funds during the Colonial situation. So that is a good work on its own. Picking from there and just focusing on the financial issues, the fund, corruption and funds. All the stuff, and looking at it from a historical perspective, and even tying it to the present time. that is not today that actually started, you know, what we are doing right now. Not for the thank you.
I think basically that's a good one. The ECG scandal.
Yes.
We've had issues. People have written a lot of things before, but when you look at this new document, it might give you, as a young scholar coming up, you need things like this to have a fresh, perspective into some of these already established, narrative.
Yeah.
So the issue of that scandal is a very important one that we can look at, especially for masters and PhD students.
Yes, please, madam.
You, my point with I also had a short, interpretation for 1960. Nigerian women, I mean, widows and orphans came.
Yeah.
And aside from this, I don't think Nigeria ever had anything, independent for widows and orphans.
It's a good point. Like a lot of these migrated archive files are about high politics, but there are some files, if you look closely, which are about welfare and development schemes as well. So there were a lot of the files are about really elite men. There are a small number of files that might be suitable for a more gendered approach, for a women's history approach. Other comments? Yes, please.
I saw a note about federal elections. So elections in Nigeria have been very nice. Doesn't even have to describe it, it's a very steep movement. So using that kind of material on federal elections, we just build insights into how elections were conducted during the colonial period. And then what may have happened back then, which contributes to what's happening now. Thank you.
I think that's a good point. Yeah. If you're interested in the history of elections, the first elections happened in this late colonial period when most of the migrated archives are from the 1950s. So if you're interested in history of elections, history of constitutional change, the migrated archives could be very useful for your studies.
Also, based on that, and if you understand that the election that was, the first republic to be have been alleged to have been manipulated by the British, that might be a very good opportunity for us to know new things about that election and probably examine the foundation of the colonial, first republic.
We're low on time, but let's have a few more comments, do you think? Let's take like 3 more comments. So 1, 2, 3.
My name is there's a particular one, yes, it's cardinal television and radio in Nigeria. So this might talk about you're talking about television or issue of television. So this now be very useful.
Yeah, good. There were several files about broadcasting and television, some from northern Nigeria, some from western Nigeria as well. So yeah, if you're interested in media history, look at those files could bring something to your project. Who was the second? Sorry.
In addition to that, it might also be good for you to also see perhaps how these stations were used as a propaganda during that transfer of power. It might be a history of propaganda by the departing colonial government.
We have someone online.
Okay, we've got 2 more comments here, and then we'll do 1 online chat because we're very well. In fact, we're over time already.
I saw something on the Nigerian Defense Scheme organization and then something else on Nigerian Defense Scheme for northern and southern Nigeria. For me to answer the question of the dichotomy in the recruitment of soldiers, because I observed that the North have a higher percentage. What's the process of recruitment that it seems to favor or give advantage to the North rather than more than the South, South. So to answer that big question for me,
Good, thank you. So important questions of military history and how they relate to Nigerian society. Excellent. That one at the back.
Okay, from page 7 to page 32, this develops research work on the international relationship with the UK and US. Now looks more about the relationship with that, and it's quite more than every other topics are having. It's also 3 pages of this discussion. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Relations with countries like the US, France, Israel, the UK. Sam, did you say there was a comment online?
Yes, please. Someone speak. Okay, you can speak now.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm also I noticed the files as well on the defense sector, and I believe those files can help researchers look into the wars of conquest of the British forces in Nigeria, because in most cases, look at already done research in that field, you notice that most of the wars of conquest have just been talking about some parts of the country, not all parts of the country. So I believe those files will as well help researchers to look into the wars of conquest that were waged by the colonial forces, and also look at why those forces were able to overwhelm the local forces in Nigeria, not just about the superior firearms they wielded, but also some other factors that contributed in the winning and losing of those wars. So that's my contribution and what I have also observed in the files.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, I think for some of us also who are interested in transnational Islamic ideology, it was also the period when British government actively monitored the Tijaniya sect across northern Nigeria up to Senegal frontier. So you can also look at that. It's a potential PhD area that perhaps might give you more visibility if you want to go into that. And another thing also is the Israeli, Nigerian-Israeli diplomatic initiative and the reactions of America. Somebody actually did that at master's level and university. Now I think we are having a new document either to reinterpret or to suggest an area of focus. So for some of us who want to go into diplomatic history, the Nigerian-American collaboration at the tail end of the British administration in Nigeria, in fear of the Cold War communism, coming into Nigeria, is also a very good opportunity because we have so many files here.
Yeah, so thank you, Jimmo. So to summarize, most of the migrated archives about Nigeria are from the 1950s. So if you're interested in this period of late colonialism, the period of constitutional negotiations, these files may be of interest to your research. A lot of the files are about elite high politics, to be honest. So if you're more interested in the history of specific local areas in Nigeria, there might not be that much here that's relevant to your project. So I'd like you to leave here, have a look at this list, take it with you. If you don't have a copy of the list but would like one, feel free to email me and I can email you your own personal copy. And that will give you an insight of the kind of material that's available within the migrated archives from Nigeria. Now, we've gone over time, so I want to close just by drawing attention to the fact that we're running a scheme. All of us are involved to our speakers. It's supported by the LSA and also backed by IFRA Nigeria as well. We're inviting applications from Nigeria-based early career researchers. We're going to appoint 6 on this scheme, okay? And those who are selected, we're looking for early career researchers who can make good use of the migrated archive in their documents. I've had a research assistant working, photographing the migrated archive files from Nigeria. So for the 6 early career researchers who are selected, we're going to make available the files that are of interest to you digitally. Plus, we're going to provide a scheme of research mentorship from an established scholar. You'll meet every month for the next year. Plus, we will pay for you to come to the Lagos Studies Association conference next year to present your findings on the migrated archives. And that will cover travel, conference registration, and accommodation for the conference. Because we're aware that British authorities removed these files from Nigeria illegitimately. This is a very small step towards making some of this material available again to early career researchers based in Nigeria, okay? So I've got some information about the scheme here. Information has also been published by the LSA on its Facebook group. So feel free to pick up the sheet before you leave. Contact me directly if you want more information. My email address is on the LSA program. Also, have a look at the LSA Facebook page if you want this information as well. So thanks so much for attending. Yeah, share these now. So Sam will give those down. Thanks, Sam. Thanks so much for coming, everyone. Thank you so much, Vincent and Mandy. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Jim. Bye-bye, Tim. Bye-bye, Mandy.
I